So welcome to the webinar on glossaries and classifications. If you have any questions, post them on the Zoom chat and someone will answer the questions. So today in the webinar, we'll go over, let me just go to the slideshow. So we'll go over, just introduction into classifications and glossary in open metadata, do a demo of all the features that we have around this. We'll also go over some best practices. Hopefully you will find it super useful. These are things that we have learned over the years doing big data in many companies. Also, we'll talk about future work and then do some Q&A. So you will hear control vocabulary being used by open metadata quite a bit, right? So control vocabulary is organizing, words and phrases into a terminology so that you can organize and retrieve information using them, right? So both glossary and classification are control vocabularies in open metadata. In fact, all the metadata that is stored in open metadata itself is done using control vocabulary through open metadata standard specification. So why control vocabulary, right? So many systems support this free-form tagging, right? Where people can freely enter text and create tags. It's generally called folksonomy or social tagging. The problem with this is people end up creating same tags, tag names for the same purpose, right? With different names. Maybe people also have some confusing names that is not very clear and people don't understand or misunderstand. There are typos in these folksonomy tags. There are abbreviations that you cannot understand. And so folksonomy is very suitable in, say, social network kind of settings. Maybe, you're storing your photos or your emails where the tags that you are adding are personal, right? The problem with folksonomy is it is non-standard, right? Versus control vocabulary provides you a taxonomy, right? For defining types and, defining concepts. The whole idea here is it is standardized, right? It is reused. Because it is standardized, there is common, consistent understanding of what the terminology means. It's suitable when a group of people are collaborating, right? So that they have consistent understanding. And data is something where a group of people are collaborating. And this, consistent understanding is very important. And that's why we don't support folksonomies. We support controlled vocabulary or taxonomies, right? Now let's look at classification, right? So classification is just, a tag or an annotation you add to a data asset. It defines type of data, right? So whether, data is sensitive or not sensitive, it has PII or, doesn't have PII, which, sort of geared towards privacy use cases. We also have within open metadata tiers as tags, right? These define what is the importance of data to an organization. There are also tags like verified or unverified that shows, whether the data is ready for consumption or not, right? So in summary, annotations, classifications are annotations that define type of data, right? And it does not define semantics of data, the meaning of the data, right? And where is classification used? It helps in browsing, searching, grouping, and managing data. It also helps in security, data privacy, and data protection use cases. All of that is done by defining policies, right? Access control policies, retention policies, data management policies. How do we do classification in open metadata? We use list of terms. This is from knowledge organization systems. The list of terms is flat list of terms. Classification is a group of similar terms and called tags, right? So there's a control vocabulary using list of terms, right? Now there is a subtle difference that is supported within open metadata classification. That is classification versus categorization, right? So an entity usually belongs to a single class and it cannot be a member of multiple classes within the same hierarchy. Example, right? Data can be either public or internal. Either it can be sensitive or non-sensitive. It cannot be both. These you can do using classification tags that are mutually exclusive. There is also categorization, right? Or categories. In some cases, an entity can belong to multiple categories. So here is an example where, let's say you have a tag called usage tag, and usage tag says, hey, here is the use cases that we are using the data for. And in this usage tag, you have, the data is used for financial reporting or compliance. A table can belong to both of these, right? A table can be used for both financial reporting and compliance. So this is what we call as categories. And this you can do by setting this classification as mutually not exclusive. Some features that we support in open metadata around classifications. Pere talked about auto classification, so identifying PII data automatically. I'll talk about this more when I do a demo. We also support tag mapping in the backend. It's still not there in the UI. You can associate two types because they're related, right? And so as an example, let's say personal data personal, right? And this is, saying that, this data has some personal data, right? But because it has personal data, it can also have data classification called, this is confidential, right? So by associating two tags, when you, apply personal tag to any data, automatically confidential tag will also be applied, right? So this is tag mapping. We use classifications for a variety of purposes. You can actually go to a specific classification, discover all the data assets that are tagged with it. You can search the data assets, filter them by tags, so that you can, it helps in your discovery, right? And browsing of all the data that is there in the catalog. You can use tags in writing policies, which is a very important use case of classification tags. We have extensive classification APIs for you to automate things. If you want to automate certain kind of tagging, these APIs support two kind of entities, classification and tags. And all of these entities are uniquely identified by a UUID and a fully qualified name. You can go to the API section of our sandbox and look at the classification section within that API, documentation to see more about, what these APIs look like. So moving on to glossary, right? Glossary is different from classification. What it is trying to do is define a vocabulary, right, for an organization to establish consistent terminology. And from consistent terminology, you can actually have common understanding across, the organization of what a term means. Glossary is used for adding semantics or meaning to data, right? So essentially in glossary, what you define is you define concepts related to a specific domain. So for example, in case of, an organization like a bank, you will define concepts like account and, balance and things like that. You also define business terminologies that are used within a domain, right? So the standard terms like, APR, right? API, right? Annual percentage yield and things like that. These are business terminologies within a domain. You can also define your business entities. You can say, hey, here is a customer, and a customer has address, phone number, SSN, and things like that. So this is essentially building terminology of, business entities, right? And defining their properties. So glossary is used for adding meaning. As an example, there could be a column called PN, and now you can say this PN column is phone number, right? So glossary adds semantics to data, and glossary in open metadata is hierarchical, right? So you essentially bring all the related terms and then add them under a hierarchy. We build this controlled vocabulary using, in knowledge organization systems, what is called as a thesauri, right? It's a semantic network of concepts. Now, what is semantic network of concepts? So let's look at what a glossary term is, right? Glossary term has a preferred terminology, right? This is a standard terminology that everybody should be using. But then there may be a variation of, terminologies that people might be using. So you can define a list of synonyms, right? So thesaurus, right? List of synonyms. You can also build a hierarchy where you can go from specific concept, generic concept to more specific concepts, right? And so that's where we have a tree structure to build the conceptual hierarchy. You can also, for any term, add related terms. That way, now you are building a network of concept, right? So an account, and then account could have relationship with account balance. Account could have different kinds of accounts, savings account, things like that. Now you can start building a conceptual graph, right, through which you can explore the data. We also have a way of automatically mapping a semantic or a meaning to a type, right? So you can associate classification tags to a glossary term. Automatically, whenever you describe the data using the glossary term, the classification tag is also added, right? So I'll talk about this more. We also have extensive glossary APIs, similar to classification. So we have glossary and glossary term as main entities, identified by unique UUID or a fully qualified name. You can create, delete, modify, update. In fact, you can also have, using APIs, export the glossary terms as a CSV or import a glossary terms from a CSV. All of this is available in our API documentation under glossary section. So one of the frequent questions that we get is, both of these two look similar. When should I use what, right? So yes, there are similarities between these two, right? Both are control vocabulary of some terminology, right? In one case, terminology is trying to add semantics. In another case, the terminology is trying to add a type for a data. And both of these can be used for labeling the data, right? You can tag the data or label the data using these terminologies defined in classification and glossary. Now let's look at the difference, right? Again, classification is used for defining type of data, right? Not for, versus glossary, which is trying to add semantics or meaning to data, right? By defining, business terminology. Classification is a control vocabulary that is very simple, right? It's just a list of terms that is grouped under classification. Control vocabulary is actually a thesauri where it is a tree of terms with relationship and synonyms. So it's much more sophisticated. Classification is typically used for policy enforcement purposes, right? So you have, privacy policies, you have data management policies, these kind of policies, data retention policies. All of these things are driven off of what is the type of data. And so, classification tags are used for policy enforcement. Glossary is for adding meaning to the data, right? So that people who are consuming the data now can understand the concepts and the descriptions. Classification is typically authored by people who are, doing compliance related work, right? Compliance teams. Versus glossary is done by people who are modeling the data, right? So they're modeling the data, maybe they have, ER diagrams and things like that. While they are modeling, they are capturing certain concepts, and those concepts end up, becoming part of glossary. It's also done by business users, right? You have, maybe, some business concepts and terminology, those are captured in glossary, right? So two different sets of people control, manage these, terminologies. So let's go to demo. Let me just start here. So both classifications and glossaries available under Govern menu. And so let's start with classification, right? So here is a classification, and so personal data is the classification, and here are the terms that are under it. So as you can see, it's a flat list. A few things that I want to call out is we actually in OpenMetadata ship some system classifications. These classifications are important part of open metadata, and so they cannot be deleted. They can be modified, updated, descriptions, and things like that. The reason is tier is an important concept in open metadata, and so you can see, how your data sets are tiered, or, PII is an important concept where auto classification is automatically applying these PII tags. So these, you can update the descriptions, but it cannot be disabled. Some of these can be cannot be deleted. Some of these can be disabled, right, when it doesn't have importance to the open metadata itself. Few other things, you can here see all the list of terms, update descriptions, and things like that. But one of the cool things here is you can look right here and look at all the assets that are tagged with PII sensitive, right? So you can discover the data using tags, which is something that I was talking about previously. So tags help you group different kinds of resources, discover them. So that is, tags. The other thing that we have also done in 1.0 release, which is pretty cool, is you can do search for tags right here. So let's say I say sensitive. Okay, it's taking me here. So let's say sensitive, and then there are two tags that match this, right? The sensitive tag and there's a special category tag, which has sensitive here from personal data. Now, the cool thing here is right here in the preview, you can look at, the usage of all these tags, right? So we have made it very easy. You can search for tags and then look at, what is tagged with it, right? What data asset is tagged with it. Moving on to glossary, which has a lot more features. So here is a banking glossary. And what we have added is in 1.0, you can collapse and look at the summary, right? Or you can look at the entire hierarchy, right? In this case, account has a lot of different types of accounts. So you can look at the entire hierarchy. You can also look at, if you look at a glossary term, as I was talking about previously, you can add synonyms, you can add related terms so that you can build a conceptual semantic graph. You can add references, right? You might have inherited this glossary term from maybe some other standard, some other place in the internet. You can add references to them. And as I was talking, because account is PII sensitive information, you can just add PII sensitive right here. And whenever you describe a column, add a semantic to a table as this is account related data, automatically PII sensitive, gets tagged. So so that is that. And let me also show you something that we had in the past, and we have now polished the user experience quite a bit. So let me create a new glossary, right? Say new set of banking terms. And so I created this. Now, if you already have a set of glossaries, you can import them, right? So the way to do that is first I say export. This has nothing to export, but it is really important because once you export, it will give you all the columns, what are the required columns, and now you can start adding values here, right? And build your CSV that you can then go and import, right? So I've also built already a CSV. So let me show you what the import experience looks like. So here I have banking terms. Let me just show you. And I've pre-populated that. And so this is giving you a preview of what can be imported, what cannot be imported. If you have any errors in your CSV, all of those things will be shown to you here. And once you have seen if there are any errors, you have an opportunity to go and fix it. So there are no errors. I'm going to import this. So this is as easy as just, filling up the CSV and importing things. So now it has imported things. Well, after you import, right, you can actually very easily just bring the term and start grouping them, right? You can also do, and this is something that, we did in 1.0. We can also rename glossaries, right? A lot of times, if you have a typo, for example, I have a typo here, you can just go here and you can rename. So I say this annual percentage rate and just, I saved it. Now it is, rename has fixed the typo that was there. Glossary again also supports search, right? Global search. Now here are multiple terms that have account in their name. You can search them. You can also go preview them. So in this case, here is the account that I was showing you before. So we have a bug here, which we are going to fix. There is, also, these are all the children terms under account, right? So you can also do search. You can do preview within the search. The other thing that we have also added is search by synonyms, right? So let's say I go to APY, and here is a glossary where annual percentage yield, right? This is APY is a acronym that is set as a synonym for this. And so let me just show you this. So APY was a synonym. So you can now search by synonyms. Let me also show you the auto classification work that we have done and how it works. So here is a table that we have set up for this demo. And in our profiler, we have set up auto classification, auto tagging. So because of the column names here, username, social security number, and address, automatically we have applied PII sensitive tags, right, in our auto classification. And this works using NLP as part of our profiler during ingestion. Another interesting thing that we also do is here is a column, right? This column doesn't mean anything. We cannot do, based on name. NLP cannot, classify it. We look at what is the content of that column, right? In this case, this content here has for this column email addresses. So it is the auto classification looks at the data in a column, right, from the sample data, and then classifies it as PII sensitive. So those are the things that I wanted to demo. Now, coming back, we want to discuss some of the best practices that we have found through the years around this terminology, right? If you have anything that you have found, just send us a Slack message. We would love to include that. We'll turn a lot of these things into our documentation, right? So one of the reasons why we have hierarchical tree structure for glossaries is so that you can group concepts that are similar instead of many solutions that provide basically flat terminology for glossary, right? In this case, here you have business terms, right? So people end up just adding phone number, and this phone number is less useful because it lacks the context of whose phone number it is, what phone number it is. Instead, you can use the hierarchy where you have user, and then under the user, you have phone number. Under business, you have phone number. User phone number is different, right? User phone number is PII, business phone number is not so. So essentially building hierarchical relationships instead of flat terms and grouping concepts together would be super useful, because when you add this tag, you also have the context that it is user phone number, right? Moving on, one of the challenges in the world of data is there are people who are, creating tables, building data, modeling data. They understand the data. And then there are people who are working on regulatory compliance. They understand the classification and the types, which is coming from, regulatory agencies. Very few people understand both data and the regulatory compliance requirements. So in an organization, because there are few of these people, you should use them and you should scale them by adding, right? When you're defining a glossary term, like something like a phone number, you can attach the classification right here. That way, people who understand the data and they know that this column is phone number, they just add this glossary term to describe the data. Automatically, the effort of these people is used to attach tags, personal data, personal, right? So you, instead of manually classifying the data, the best way to do it is have a glossary term to add the meaning to the data, and along with the meaning, the type comes right through this mapping. Make use of tier classification. So tiering is something that was super useful in how we organize data at Uber, right? So at Uber, we had 250,000 tables. And so whenever you need to tag, add description, our focus was getting diluted across important and unimportant data. So we came up with the concept of tiering, right? Tier one is super important data. It is used for very important purposes like revenue calculation, regulatory requirement, reporting, and things like that. And then progressively the importance of data goes down all the way to tier 5, which is unimportant. Somebody has created this as a self-service data asset. Nobody's using it. Nobody's maintaining it, right? So now one advantage of tiering your data is, and you can start with tier ones. Tier one is source of truth data. It is used for important purposes. If you tier them, then your organization can focus on improving tier one data, right? You add descriptions there, maybe data quality tests there, maybe have better SLAs. This helps you not only focus on what is important, it also has much higher impact on just trying to make all data better, right? So the second thing that you can also do is, and here is where auto tagging will come in open metadata in the future, where we'll identify these are tier 5 data sets, right? That is not used. Nobody's owning it. No, there is no description coverage. You can start deleting them, right? These are unimportant data sets. You can take a look at them and then delete them, right? Start with tier 1 and tier 5 and slowly evolve to other tiers as your organization needs. But tiering is a very important concept around classification. Use classifications to simplify policies, right? So instead of trying to go, add a policy to each resource, you actually can group resources by a classification type, right? So an example is sensitive data, right? Instead of going and trying to attach a policies, to every table that has sensitive data and say this access is not allowed, you can just attach, the sensitive tag, and then now you can author a policy where it matches based on this classification tag for all the resources, right? So you have one policy instead of trying to, attach policy at every resource level or authoring different policy types, right? So using classification, you can simplify your policies, the number of policies you have. Use display name to improve your names, right? So a lot of times name is not under your control. Maybe you are importing some glossary that you previously built. It is using some acronym. It is using some term that is not well understood. In fact, you can also add, if you are inheriting an English glossary, maybe you can add a French equivalent term. Use display name to make your names better, right? In this case, there is dep prod instead of that product department, right? So the other advantage of this is nobody is going to search for your data using dep_prod, right? They're most likely to use common terms like product, department, and things like that. Having this display names will help people discover the data better using common terms, right? Instead of acronyms. Use glossary import and export. I demoed this to you, and in my demo, I was trying to show you how you can import a lot of terms all at once, but you can also export your glossary anytime and then edit the descriptions so that you can do this in bulk. You can use the power of spreadsheets to set multiple reviewers, owners, and things like that all at once, and then you can import it back, right? So use the power of import and export. A lot of times people end up creating glossary terms like, with typo and things like that. And then they end up, tagging many data assets using these labels. You've done a lot of work, right? In terms of tagging, don't lose that work. Use our rename feature. You can rename and, fix your typos instead of losing all the work of tagging that you've done. Finally, right, group similar concepts together, right? This is a variation of, first best practice. Instead of having again, flat hierarchy for related concepts like this, right? There's account, checking account, savings account, joint account. Now you can start grouping them and build, semantic relationship where, all of these are, account is a generic term, right? And this is, more specialization or specific term of account, right? So group similar concepts together. This will help you browse and understand your data through concepts very easily. So some future work, right? So we've refined our glossary page over 3 iterations in last 3 releases. We have not done the same for classification UI page. We want that page to be refined further. We are going to add glossary term approval workflow. So today, glossary terms, you cannot change, you cannot have a glossary term in draft phase, and then, reviewers can approve it so that it becomes approved. So this is a governance functionality. Also tag approval workflows, right? So we have tagged states called suggested, accepted, and approved. Today, everything is just in accepted state. Because now we are doing auto tagging, we can suggest the tags to you. And as an owner, you can accept the tags. Perhaps some tags are very important for governance purposes and you don't want it to be misclassified. So we will also have reviewers being able to approve the accepted, tags, right? So that way your, data governance specialist can come and say, this tag makes sense here. And so they can approve it. Auto tagging of glossary terms, because glossary terms are, have preferred name and synonyms. Now we can start mapping them to the column names, right? And based on that, we can start suggesting that, hey, you know what, this column probably is similar to this concept, right, from this glossary term. So there will be auto tagging that we'll work on. Now, since you're attaching, the concept to, let's say, a column or a table, and those concepts have certain specific requirements, right? If it is a phone number, we could say automatically phone number should have this pattern, right? And this pattern can be suggested as a test, right? So test suggestions can be driven from the glossary terms tagging. So these are some of the things that we are working on. Hopefully this was informative. If there are any Q&A, you can unmute your mic and ask questions.
Hey, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for presentation and overall for all work that you guys did. I found that OpenMetadata really cool tool, very helpful for data governance in our organization. And one thing specifically about glossaries that I found missing, but I don't know, maybe it's only for us this way, maybe for other people it's not applicable, but I found, for example, that when you're creating a glossary term, all assets there under this glossary term, they have a kind of the same tier, but you need to go and apply this tier for all assets, like one by one. There is no such a thing like with tags, for example. When you add tag to a glossary term, then it's automatically applied to assets, right? It would be nice to have something like a tier maybe for a glossary term. So you apply this term and all these derived assets that apply to this glossary term also automatically got this the same tier. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, no. So we are making some improvements there. I missed showing one of the demos to you where if you go here, right, and now when you, let's try this, right? So bank new to, and tell me if this addresses your question, right? So now I'm creating a new glossary, right? So I can actually say, let's say all of these things are PII sensitive. Okay. Just taking an example. And I say, you know what, for this glossary, maybe Harsha and Harsha is a reviewer. Okay. So if you import, right, the new terms, right, and so we'll say import view. Now, if you go here from the glossary, the owner and the reviewer is inherited, right? So
you didn't save the tag in the
I didn't save the tag.
solution.
Okay, I need to redo all the things. But anyway, so even the tags get inherited, right? So the problem is today the feature works like this, right? You must have set some of these tags and reviewers and all of that, and any new term that you're adding, they're automatically inheriting. You can go override it. We are making some improvements there where if you go here and then, you know, after you have all these terms, if you go set up reviewers here, if the reviewers are not set in the terms underneath it, when you set the reviewers here, it will be bulk copied down to all the terms that don't have reviewers, right? So that work is going to happen in the next release.
I think the question maybe here is, let's say account has some tags, and if I go and tag the entity, it's a table name customer with the account, the associated tags also should show up as separate tags, right? That's what you're asking, right?
No, I mean more about tiers and things.
Yeah,
like
tier being one.
Yeah, tier thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, here, if I go add account, right? We need a bank account. Okay, some of these okay, let's see our new two.
Right to the top.
I've created so many accounts. Now I want bank and then account. Okay, let's go here.
Okay. You need to save.
Yeah. So this is banking account. So let's say banking account has PII sensitive. So I go to dim address. Let's say banking account. Yeah, this is only giving certificate of deposit. Right. So I added this. These were associated tags that got added automatically, which is sort of what I was saying. Yeah, you can also add tiers as tags, but we can have a separate conversation on this. Tier should not be associated. You know, this may not be the best way to use the tiers. Tiers should be based on the importance of data. And so unless, let's say, a certain term is important, and you know, if the data has any data related to that term, it will only be used for important use cases, then you can do some things like that. But it's same as this, right? PIS entity, we can turn it into tier tags. Any other questions?
Yeah. Hi, Suresh. This is Raghav. I have one question. A very interesting webinar, I must say. When you are adding a glossary term, technically you are not defining a data type. For example, you have an account as a glossary and you have account balance ideally. That should be integer, right? So because where I'm coming from is that had it been there, then technically the data type can be derived from there as well, right? And you can have a data quality check saying that it is not in synchrony.
That is correct. So, you know, it's a bit tricky, right? What you are doing when you are defining glossary term is you are defining a logical model, right? And as this data is stored in on online databases and data warehouses, they may end up changing the format, whatever, right? That these things could happen. But if the format could be the same, you could see defining a glossary term which says maybe customer. You're defining essentially sort of like a logical concept, right? You're defining business entities, and you can say customer has phone number must adhere to this format, right? Those things you can do.
Okay, okay. And my second question is that when you talk about the hierarchical of the glossary hierarchy, right? For like just taking an example, an account will have a user, right? But user as a standalone will have its entire glossary of, let's say, hundreds of attribute. But on the account level, we are just maintaining, let's say, user and first name, last name, that's it, right? We are not maintaining his XYZ information. So when we are taking account, when we are making the glossary, can we pick and choose, or it's like whole in whole whole in whole user will technically be within the account?
Yeah, so the way I would model this is you will have user as a glossary,
Yeah.
define all the user related stuff, and then you have account, right?
Yep.
And user is related to account. Now, one of the things that we need to do is our relationship is just plain related to. In the future, we will also add qualification of what kind of relationship it is, right? And it is, single direction, bi-direction, all of those things.
Okay.
In which case, you will have user glossary that is referring to account, right? Where the relationship would say user has accounts, right?
Okay, got it. Yeah, no, that would
But
be
today
nice
it
to
is
have.
just a single arrow, right? It doesn't have
Hmm.
what the relationship is, cardinality is, none of that.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead, Laila Patel.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much, first of all, for such a nice, insightful webinar, I must say. Just a feedback from my side on the very recent question which someone was asking about the glossary. So there's an idea which we came up and we found it quite beneficial if we think about user and accounts perspective. It's like we tried to start our hierarchical glossary from party, and then we took it to individual party and non-individual party. So it became quite easier for us to capture the relationship at the moment in a flat style again. So this may help a lot of users, I guess.
Hey, thank you for that. And I think, because our webinar is 1 hour, I didn't add some of the other ideas that we have done in the past, where you can actually take your ERD diagrams or your business entities, you can define them as glossaries. Now you have a vocabulary to describe your language through your business entity, describe your data through your business entities, right? And so, that's a longer topic. Maybe
Yes,
something that we'll blog about.
for sure. Thank you.
Hey,
We have 3 more minutes.
yes, I have one last question. Hey, can you hear me well? Thanks for the information, really valuable. But I have a question more about tagging. So suppose that I have a data asset or a set of data assets, and I want to tag those data assets with, regardless of the concept of the tagging right now, because the tagging right now is just a word, sensitive or not, PII or not, and so on. But if I want to put some information about it, like that reflect that this data asset is actually a data product, and this data product has a name, it has a domain, it has a responsible person, it has a lot of other stuff, like it has a canvas that has a link, some documentation, and so on. So I wonder if there is a way to do that here, because in open metadata, I don't think there is a way to do that now. However, from the documentation I read in the tags, there is a way to define a tag and children. So you can have some children for a tag, and then you can achieve that indirectly somehow. So my question is, sorry, go ahead.
Good. No, please go ahead.
No, I have 2 questions just to give you also the chance to reply. So the first one is related to, if you plan to do something like that, I can implement my own piece of metadata, which is basically a data structure that can be used to tag or to attach to data assets, columns and tables eventually. the second question is, are you planning to integrate with something like Google Cloud Template Tags, for instance, the concept that Google has, that you can create tags and attach it to BigQuery data assets, BigQuery columns, and so on? Those are the two questions I have.
Yeah, so we've thought a lot about your data product, data mesh related,
but this one example, it's not like it's one example, the data product metadata, but it can be any other structure like data governance, whatever, data quality dimensions. It can be anything.
Yeah. So, you have vocabulary to describe them, right?
Definitely.
If you want to do data product today, you can actually do data product, right? You have a data product, as a classification, and then you have a set of data products that you have defined. You can tag all the entities with data product tag that belong to certain data product. You can also do domains in the similar way. So that's so, everybody understands where we are going. We believe that domains and the data products are more than just defining a type of data, right? Or, adding meaning to the data. We will end up adding some first-class support for domains and data products. And we want to do it right? We don't want to just add this feature without thinking through. So this is something that we will do. The second thing is, as related to Google BigQuery tags, we today import those BigQuery tags automatically for you, and we create a classification automatically for you. That is what we do.
Yeah.
But if what other integrations are possible, we can definitely have a longer conversation in the Slack.
Perfect. That would be great. Thanks a lot. But again, I'm not talking about data product. I'm talking about the concept itself, not necessarily.
Yeah. I think, if tags are going to be very simple, glossary is where we can start adding lot more things, right? A glossary could be of a type metric, and metric could have a formula and all of those things. So there's a long list of things that we can do to, including, you should be able to define a type of glossary where you have a bunch of information that is unique to your use case. So you should be able to extend the glossary itself to include additional information. These are some things that, we'll continue to work on.
Thank you.
There are no more questions. I think we are 1 minute over. We are going to be here for a couple of minutes. If anybody has questions, we can answer them.
I think Lakshmi said, are there any standards to have glossary terms?
Are there any standards?
To have glossary terms. Lakshmi, feel free to speak up, unmute yourself and ask the question.
Oh, yeah. So I just joined very recently. I just wanted to have these questions because in my organization, or also a couple of my organization as well, that I see quite often practice that this glossary terms is not actually being standardized. It's actually at like any language to be phrased up, or it could be like a very long terminologies to be phrased it up. So does OpenMetadata have any sort of like a standards to make this glossary terms to be tagged for a particular attributes or for particular data assets? Are there any standards and regulations to be followed to have these terminologies to be assigned?
Yeah, I think there are two aspects to this. Right? What should be the schema to express the glossary? That is one level of standardization, and there is XML, RDF, all kinds of things that are there. The second thing is standardizing the terminology itself, and that is specific to a domain, right? In some domains, you have, if you look at National Institute of Standards, NIST, they have certain standard glossaries, right? And so there is standards for the domains. There are multiple standards here. There are different definitions here. So yeah, standardizing a domain's terminology itself, I think there are multiple answers there. So, as far as we are concerned, we are like giving you a way to use OpenMetadata specification to, capture glossary. And then you can bring any glossary terms from any standards that you are following and get it into open metadata.
Yeah, sure. Why the question is raised up is actually like there are some filters or probably that's based upon these glossary terminologies, and that's actually not getting the proper results according to these terms or terminologies which the people have been tagging to the data assets. So it would be great something actually mapping such unstandardized terminologies to a proper terms or topics would be really great to filter the data assets according to the need. So that's actually the question behind my the basic question that I have raised up here.
We can definitely have longer conversation in Slack, because maybe we are not understanding what the question is. Because glossary is a preferred term, and synonyms and all of those things, you can capture a lot of variation of names. And if you want, if there are terms that are used, you should be able to, that is another work that we have, where you should be able to take an existing, if you have multiple terminology that you have used as tags, and you want to standardize on one of them, we will have some capability to merge tags. You can say, if for these 3 terms, now this becomes the preferred term, get rid of other terms or make other terms as synonyms.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just one more from my side. It's like when we were talking about the future scope or future enhancement in the glossary side. So once the workflow is going to be introduced for the approval cycle, just a bit of suggestion, if there could be a space somewhere that the reviewer can make some suggestions, and if we can attach more than one reviewer.
Yeah, so we have reviewers concept already, right? So you have a list of reviewers, and they are the gatekeepers, right, on adding a glossary term to a particular glossary. And just like we have request descriptions, suggest descriptions, there will be workflows that will start, and in which case reviewers are the guys who are going to be tasked. They will have a task to approve or reject.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, I think we are 5 minutes over. Thank you everyone for attending.